The day my daughter received her nursing degree was the day my dead parents came back to buy her life. My name is Gwen Mitchell. I am 39 years old. 20 years ago, my parents threw me out like medical waste. I was 19 years old, standing in a freezing thunderstorm with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes. My mother pointed a shaking, perfectly manicured finger at the street, telling me I was dead to them. That same night, they signed papers erasing me from the family. I kept those papers. I kept everything. For 2 decades, I was invisible to them. They told everyone I was away on a long-term medical mission in a third-world country, building their spotless reputation on the grave of the daughter they threw away. For the last 2 months, Layla had been receiving anonymous, encrypted messages on her phone. Just 3 words, over and over. They are hunting. Run. We thought it was a spam bot. We were wrong. The sender wasn't a bot. It was the 14-year-old replacement daughter my parents had adopted, secretly sending digital breadcrumbs from her ICU bed to warn the sister she had never met. Then last week they showed up at my child Layla's college graduation. They were desperate, crying, begging us for a lifeline. They didn't come to celebrate the grandchild they had ignored for 20 years. They came because they had a new child, a teenage daughter they adopted to replace me, who was dying of kidney failure. They had secretly run DNA tests through old hospital records and found out Layla was a perfect organ match. They offered me $500,000 for my child's organs. They had no idea that my great-aunt Martha was standing right behind me with a dark blue folder, and what was inside that folder would bring them to their knees and destroy everything they'd spent 40 years building. Providence, Rhode Island, October 2004. I was 19, a struggling pre-med student at Providence University, and the youngest child of Robert and Donna Mitchell. On paper, we were the perfect medical family. My father was the ruthless chief of surgery at Providence General Hospital. My mother was the head of hospital administration. We sat in the front row at hospital charity galas every month, dressed in expensive clothes. But I learned our family's cruel rules early on. Nolan, my older brother, was already a top surgical resident. Chloe, my older sister, was a rising star in pediatric care. And then there was me. I was the mistake. My parents only cared about perfection and saving lives in front of cameras. Behind closed doors, our house was as cold and sterile as an operating room. I just wanted to be loved, not graded, I used to think to myself, holding back tears in my lonely bedroom. The only real love I ever felt came from my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was painfully fading away from severe heart failure in a private hospital wing. And beside her, day and night, was her sister, my great-aunt Martha. Aunt Martha was a retired trauma nurse. She smelled like peppermint and old books, and she was the only one who saw the dark truth about my parents. "You have a warm heart, Gwen," Aunt Martha would whisper, holding my shaking hand. "Don't let them turn it to ice." I met Mason Wright in the sterile hallways of the cardiology ward. It sounds unremarkable, but for me that hospital wing was sanctuary. Mason didn't wear a white doctor's coat. He wore a blue uniform. He was 20, working as a hospital janitor to pay for his sick uncle's medical bills. He had the kindest, saddest eyes I'd ever seen. He found me crying in the hospital stairwell one November afternoon after my father had screamed at me for getting a B in biology. "Hey," he said, sliding onto the cold concrete step next to me, handing me a clean tissue. "You okay?" We dated secretly for 6 months. He was gentle and patient. He didn't care about my family's money or medical legacy. October 15th, 2004. I'll never forget staring at that pregnancy test in the bathroom of a dingy diner near the hospital. 2 pink lines. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I told Mason, he didn't run. He held my hands, his calloused fingers rough but warm, and said, "We'll figure this out together, Gwen. You're not alone." I decided to tell my parents at my father's private clinic after hours. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd ever stand in the same room with them as their daughter. Friday, November 12th, 2004, 8 p.m. The clinic smelled sharply of bleach. "I have something to tell you," I whispered. My parents turned around. My father was washing his hands at the sink. My mother was reading a patient chart. I was 10 weeks pregnant. "I'm pregnant." The water kept running. My father slowly turned off the tap. He dried his hands, piece by piece. "Who is the father?" His voice was ice. "A medical student? Someone from the board?" "His name is Mason Wright. He's a janitor at your hospital." My mother dropped the chart. It hit the floor with a loud slap. "You've been sleeping with the cleaning staff?" "He's a good person, Mom," I cried, my voice echoing off the cold tiles. My father stepped forward, his eyes dead. You will terminate it tomorrow morning. I will schedule the procedure myself. The silence in that clinic felt like a vacuum sucking the air from my lungs. I counted my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Then my father picked up his office phone. Security? I need an unauthorized person removed from my office. Robert, wait, my mother started. A brief, surprising flicker of maternal panic crossing her eyes. For a split second I thought she might hug me, but my father shot her a warning glare, and she instantly straightened her posture, slipping back into her role as the cold hospital administrator. She will ruin the hospital's reputation. A teenage pregnancy with a janitor? The board will crucify us. He looked at me like I was a failed experiment. If you walk out that door pregnant, you are no longer a Mitchell. I am not a disease, I thought to myself, my chest burning. And my baby is not a tumor you can just cut out. Then I'm not a Mitchell, I whispered. By 8:30 p.m., 2 burly hospital security guards had escorted me out the back doors into a freezing torrential downpour. I was standing in the clinic parking lot, shivering in just a thin sweater. I didn't have to call anyone. Suddenly, a beat-up green station wagon screeched to a halt in front of me. The passenger door flew open. "Get in, child," Great Aunt Martha yelled over the roaring thunder. I collapsed into the passenger seat sobbing. The car smelled like old leather and peppermint. "How did you know?" I choked out. "Your grandmother," Martha said softly, her eyes flashing with anger. "She was lying in her hospital bed and heard the nurses gossiping about your father screaming. She called me from her room. She told me to go get her girl. We didn't have a grand plan. Martha drove me straight to her tiny, cluttered cottage on the edge of town. You stay here as long as you need," she said, wrapping a thick quilt around my shaking shoulders. 2 days later, my father didn't even bother mailing the disinheritance papers. He sent a grim-faced hospital lawyer to Aunt Martha's porch to hand-deliver them. The legal document stated that Gwen Elizabeth Mitchell forfeited all trust funds, and the Mitchell family bore no medical, legal, or moral obligation to her or any child. I kept that paper. It became my armor. Exactly 1 month later, the call came. My grandmother's heart was failing. My parents had banned me from the hospital, but Mason smuggled me up the fire escape in an oversized janitor's uniform. I slipped into her dim room. The machines beeped a slow, sad rhythm. "My brave girl," she whispered, her fragile hand squeezing mine. She slipped a small, heavy envelope into my pocket. "This is my secret savings. Build a life of healing, Gwen, not coldness." She passed away that night. A piece of my soul went with her, but her gift gave me the foundation I needed. With Grandma's money, Mason and I rented a damp basement apartment underneath a noisy 24-hour pharmacy. It smelled like cheap cough syrup and damp brick, but it was ours. Layla Gwen Mitchell Wright was born on August 12, 2005, in a tiny, underfunded community clinic. She had her father's kind brown eyes and my stubborn chin. She came into the world screaming, and I kissed her forehead. Good, I thought. Make them hear you. The next few years were an exhausting, beautiful struggle. Mason started taking night classes to become an EMT. I worked as a receptionist at a local gym, studying community health books at the front desk. We lived on discount vegetables and sheer willpower. We kept saying we would get married when Mason got his ambulance badge. But life is incredibly fragile. In the spring of 2010, Mason started getting nosebleeds and bruising easily. After weeks of tests, the clinic doctor gave us the terrifying news: aggressive leukemia. He fought so hard, but on a quiet Tuesday morning, in a sterile hospice bed, he held my hand, gave me one last tired smile, and peacefully stopped breathing. He was 26. Layla was barely 5. There was no life insurance. Instead, Mason's EMT brothers and the local hospital charity fund raised $20,000 for us. It felt like blood money. I was 25, a widow, a single mother, with a broken heart and $20,000. I could have crawled into a hole and given up, but I remembered my grandmother's words: build a life of healing. I had learned a lot about physical therapy and holistic care while trying to help Mason manage his pain. I had a natural gift for understanding the human body's trauma. In 2012, I attended a free grief support group at a community center. That's where I met Dr. Evelyn Vaughn, a brilliant, retired holistic physician whose daughter had also passed away. "You have a healer's intuition," Evelyn told me after I helped a sobbing woman relieve a massive tension headache with simple pressure points. "Let me teach you." By 2014, with Evelyn's guidance and Grandma's remaining savings, I secured a small medical innovation grant. I opened Haven Holistic Wellness. Our first office was a single rented room inside a YMCA. I worked 80-hour weeks. By 2018, I had a network of 5 holistic wellness clinics across the state. By 2022, New England Health Magazine ran a cover story on me, from homeless teen to holistic healing CEO, Gwen Mitchell's journey. I told the Health Magazine reporter everything except my parents' real names. Not to protect their medical legacy, but to protect Layla from the toxic hospital politics they controlled. I didn't want any fancy doctors knocking on our door, digging up pain that didn't belong to them. By May 2025, Haven Holistic Wellness had 45 employees and made $7 million a year. We had an office overlooking the beautiful Boston Harbor. Layla was 20, graduating early from Boston Health Sciences University with a degree in nursing. She was brilliant, compassionate, and everything I'd hoped she would become. For 20 years, I hadn't heard a single word from the Mitchell family. Until graduation day. We were standing on the bright, sunny university lawn right after she received her diploma. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and expensive perfume. Great Aunt Martha was beside us, leaning on a silver cane, her grip tight on a dark blue folder she brought everywhere. We were laughing, posing for pictures, completely happy. Then my heart stopped. A sleek black Mercedes drove right over the graduation grass, ignoring the security guards. It parked aggressively near the oak trees. 2 figures got out. My father looked exhausted, his surgeon's hands actually trembling. My mother looked frail, her perfect makeup hiding deep, dark circles. They weren't the proud, arrogant rulers I remembered. They looked haunted. I hadn't seen them since the night they threw me into the rain. I wanted to grab Layla and run toward the campus police station, but I froze. I was 39 years old. I owned a company. I would not run. "Gwen, we don't have much time," my father rasped, bypassing any kind of greeting. He scanned my expensive dress, Aunt Martha's glare, and finally locked his cold eyes on Layla in her graduation gown. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, stepping between him and my daughter. "We know Layla's blood type. We know she has the rare tissue match." I stared at him, my blood running cold. "What?" He pulled out a thick, stolen medical file with the Providence General Hospital logo. "You illegally searched my daughter's medical records from when she broke her arm at 10 years old?" I hissed. My mother stepped forward, her voice cracking. "We adopted a little girl 12 years ago. Her name is Maya. She is dying of total kidney failure." The words hit me like a physical punch. They had replaced me. They bought a shiny new daughter to play the perfect family role. And now that their perfect replacement was broken, they were hunting us down. Layla's eyes widened as the encrypted warnings on her phone suddenly made horrifying sense. Maya had been trying to save Layla from her own hospital bed. They don't see my beautiful, brilliant Layla. They just see a bag of spare parts for their real family, I thought, my stomach churning with disgust. "She has weeks left, Gwen. Nobody on the National Registry is a match," my mother sobbed. For a second, I saw real agonizing pain in my mother's eyes, the terror of a mother losing a child. It was a human emotion I never thought she possessed, but it wasn't enough to excuse what they were doing. "We will put $500,000 into a private account for Layla tomorrow," my father said, waving a thick contract. "All she has to do is come to my hospital, undergo the extraction surgery, and she can go back to her life." He didn't call it a donation, he called it an extraction, like she was just a biological machine. $500,000? I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. "Is that the price tag for cutting open a girl you threw away 20 years ago?" Aunt Martha stepped directly in front of Layla, her cane digging deep into the dirt. "You bloodsuckers aren't touching one hair on this girl's head," Martha growled, her voice like grinding stones. My father's face went red, his old arrogant temper flaring up. "This isn't your choice, Martha. Layla is an adult. We will speak to her directly." He took a step toward my daughter. "You want to cut open the grandchild you threw away like garbage to save your reputation project?" I screamed, the campus falling silent around us. People in graduation gowns were starting to stare. My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Please, Gwen, she's 14, she's your sister." "I don't have a sister," I yelled, pulling my arm away. "My sister watched from a window while I was thrown into the freezing rain." My father glared at me, tightening his grip on the contract. "I have spent the last week quietly buying out the primary investors of Haven Holistic Wellness," my father said, his voice dropping to a deadly, calculating whisper. If Layla doesn't surrender to the extraction, I will shutter your clinics in 24 hours. And I will personally see to it that the medical board revokes Layla's nursing license for fraud before her career even starts. It was blackmail, emotional, public, and financial blackmail. The threat hung in the bright graduation air like a dark cloud. You want to extort me for my organs, Doctor Mitchell? Layla's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. She stepped out from behind Great Aunt Martha, the wind catching her dark green nursing graduation gown. She wasn't a confused college kid in sweatpants. She was a fully trained medical professional holding her honors diploma. My mother gasped, seeing Layla up close for the first time. You look just like Gwen did, she whispered, her hands shaking. Don't talk about my mother, Layla snapped, her brown eyes blazing with cold fire. I know exactly who you are. I grew up knowing you erased my mom because she didn't fit into your perfect, sterile hospital image. My father stood tall, trying to use his hospital authority. Layla, you are a nurse now. You took an oath to do no harm. Your sister Maya is in the ICU on dialysis. Without your kidney, she won't make it to Christmas. He is using her own good heart against her, I thought, my chest tightening with panic. He knows Layla wants to save lives, and he's turning that into a weapon. Maya is not my sister, Layla said, her voice trembling just a little. And as a nurse, I know the medical ethics board would strip your medical license for illegally accessing my DNA files to hunt me down. My father flinched. He hadn't expected her to know the law. Suddenly, the rigid, perfect Donna Mitchell broke. My mother collapsed onto the grass, her expensive silk skirt staining with dirt. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob with deep, ugly, tearing sounds. Please, she wailed, rocking back and forth. I can't lose my baby. I can't watch Maya die. She's so scared, Gwen. Please don't let my baby die. For a single, confusing second, my heart broke for her. I saw the raw, terrifying grief of a mother about to lose a child. It was real. She truly loved Maya in a way she had never loved me, but that realization only made the old scars hurt more. She was capable of love. She just hadn't wanted to give it to me. Layla hesitated, her nursing instincts fighting against her anger. She looked at the crying woman on the ground, and her shoulders softened. Before Layla could say yes out of pity, Great Aunt Martha banged her silver cane against the nearest oak tree. Thwack! Get up off the dirt, Donna. Stop manipulating this child, Martha barked. My father lunged forward. Keep your mouth shut, Martha, or I will have you arrested for harassment. Martha didn't blink. Slowly, she unzipped the dark blue folder she had been clutching all day. She pulled out a single piece of paper, folded in half, and shoved it against my father's chest. Do you want me to give this to the hospital board, Robert? Or maybe the local news? My father snatched the paper. He looked at it. In 3 seconds, the color completely drained from his face. His arrogant jaw dropped, and a thick drop of sweat rolled down his temple. He looked terrified. What is it, Robert? My mother cried from the grass. He crumpled the paper in his fist. He didn't answer her. He just grabbed her arm, hauling her roughly to her feet. We are leaving, he choked out, his voice suddenly small and shaky. You have 48 hours to drop this organ hunt, or I release everything in this folder, Martha warned, zipping it back up. My parents stumbled back to their black Mercedes. They didn't look back. The tires squealed as they sped away off the campus lawn. Layla let out a breath she had been holding and leaned against me. Mom, what just happened? She whispered. I looked at Aunt Martha, who was staring at the retreating car with fierce, protective eyes. Aunt Martha, I said slowly, what is in that folder? The truth, sweetie, Martha sighed, suddenly looking very old and tired. Things I promised your grandmother I would only use if Robert ever tried to destroy you again. That evening, instead of a graduation party, the three of us sat around the scratched wooden table in Aunt Martha's cozy cottage. The smell of peppermint tea filled the air, calming my racing heart. Martha placed the dark blue folder in the center of the table. Your father didn't just throw you out for being pregnant, Gwen, Martha said quietly, her old hands resting on the plastic cover. He threw you out because your pregnancy threatened to expose the biggest medical fraud in Providence General's history. Layla and I stared at her in shock. It's time you both knew what really happened 20 years ago, Martha said, opening the folder. The faded yellow papers inside the dark blue folder smelled like dust and old secrets. We sat around Aunt Martha's small kitchen table, the only sound coming from a heavy antique clock ticking on the wall. Martha slid a thick stack of Providence General Hospital financial ledgers toward me. Right next to them was a surgical report from September 2004, stamped confidential. "Look at the signature on the surgery report, Gwen," Martha said softly, pouring more hot water into my teacup. I traced my finger over the ink. It was my father's bold, aggressive handwriting. "Robert Mitchell, Chief of Surgery." "It says here the patient suffered a severe spinal stroke during a routine gallbladder removal." "That patient was Mason's uncle," Martha revealed, her voice heavy with grief. The air left my lungs. Mason's uncle? The man Mason worked double shifts as a janitor to support? My mind spun like a broken compass. "But Mason told me his uncle had a natural disease?" "Mason lied to protect you," Martha explained, reaching across the table to squeeze my cold hand. "Your father botched that surgery. He made a careless mistake because he was exhausted from attending high society parties. He paralyzed that poor man. And then, to protect his perfect reputation, he altered the medical records to make it look like a natural stroke." Layla pulled the papers closer, her eyes scanning the complex medical codes. As a nurse, she understood exactly what she was looking at. "Mom, this ledger shows money being transferred out of the hospital's charity care fund into a private offshore account," Layla whispered, pointing to a column of red numbers. "Exactly," Martha nodded grimly. "Your father was embezzling millions from the charity fund, the same fund meant to help poor patients like Mason's uncle. He used that stolen money to secretly pay off victims of his surgical mistakes, so they wouldn't sue him and ruin his career." Suddenly, the pieces of my broken past snapped together with a sickening crunch. That night in the clinic, it wasn't just about the shame of a teenage pregnancy. "Mason found these draft reports in your father's private trash bin while cleaning the office late one night," Martha continued. "He took them to your grandmother. She investigated and found the financial ledgers. When your father found out you were pregnant with Mason's baby, he panicked. My stomach twisted into painful knots. If Mason and I had a baby, Mason would become family. He would have access to our lives. Dad knew Mason had the proof to send him to federal prison. He threw you out to break the connection," Layla realized, her voice trembling with raw anger. "He erased you to discredit Mason. If Mason ever went to the police, your father could just say Mason was a disgruntled, crazy ex-boyfriend trying to get revenge." Tears burned my eyes as I thought about Mason. He carried that massive, dangerous secret all by himself. He never told me how evil my father truly was because he knew it would break my heart. He chose to live in a damp basement and work himself to the bone, just to keep Layla and me safe from my father's wrath. Suddenly, a sharp, frantic knock rattled the cottage door. We froze. Aunt Martha gripped her cane tightly. I opened it to find a young man in expensive hospital scrubs, his chest heaving. "I'm Dr. Eris Thorne, junior surgeon," he breathed heavily, stepping inside without permission. "Nolan sent me, Doctor. Mitchell is destroying the physical ledgers at the hospital tonight. I have the digital access codes to the offshore accounts, but I need to cross-reference them with your blue folder right now." He looked desperate, but Layla's eyes narrowed. "Nolan doesn't even know we're here," she whispered, her tech instincts flaring. Before Thorne could grab the folder from the table, Layla slammed her hand over it. "He's a mole!" Thorne's panicked expression instantly morphed into a cold snarl. He lunged for the papers, but Aunt Martha swung her silver cane, catching him hard in the shin with a sickening crack. He cursed, stumbling backward toward the door. "You're dead, both of you," Thorne spat, fleeing into the freezing night. My father hadn't just threatened us financially. He had sent a spy to steal our only armor. We didn't have a second to process the betrayal. 10 minutes later, my cell phone screamed. It was my clinic manager at Haven Wellness. "Gwen, the state health department is raiding the clinic. They have a seizure warrant for all our digital drives based on an anonymous tip about fraud." My father was making good on his threat. "He's trying to destroy our business and our digital backups so we have no credibility," Layla realized, pulling out her hospital-issued tablet. Her fingers flew across the glowing screen in a blur. "I'm remotely locking down Haven's servers and copying Aunt Chloe's digital logs to an encrypted flash drive." We were in a breathless race against time, fighting a multi-million-dollar hospital machine from a cluttered kitchen table. By the time Layla secured the data, the clinic servers had been physically ripped from the walls across town. We had the flash drive, but we were out of time. Saturday night, the air in Boston felt heavy and suffocating, like the sky was holding its breath. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Providence General, underground parking level 3. Come alone. Miss Nolan." I hadn't seen my older brother in 20 years. I didn't go alone. Aunt Martha insisted on driving me, parking her old station wagon in the shadows while I walked into the freezing damp concrete garage. The parking lot smelled intensely of car exhaust and bleach, illuminated by a single buzzing broken neon light. Nolan stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. He was wearing wrinkled green surgical scrubs, his face pale and deeply lined with stress. He looked nothing like the golden boy I remembered. He looked like a man who had been poisoned by his own life. "Nolan," I said, my voice echoing in the empty garage. He didn't try to hug me. Instead, he shoved a heavy red plastic hospital keycard into my trembling hand. "This grants access to the hospital's executive administrative floor," he whispered, looking around nervously. He is terrified of our father, I realized in my inner monologue. The great doctor. Nolan Mitchell is still just a scared little boy. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. "Because I was in the operating room when Mason's uncle had his stroke, Gwen," Nolan choked out, tears pooling in his tired eyes. "I was a junior resident. I watched Dad sever the spinal artery because his hands were shaking from a hangover, and I watched him alter the chart." My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. "You knew? For 20 years you knew Mason's uncle was murdered on the table, and you let Dad throw me out into the rain?" "I wanted the chief resident spot," Nolan sobbed, his voice cracking with shame. "I chose my career over my own sister. I traded your life for a scalpel. I've been a coward my whole life." I stared at him, the betrayal stung, but I needed answers. Why is Dad so desperate to save Maya? Why go to these insane illegal lengths for an adopted daughter? Nolan wiped his face. "Maya isn't just an adopted daughter, Gwen. 12 years ago, Dad botched another surgery. The patient was a single mother. She died on the table." I gasped, clapping a hand over my mouth. To avoid a multi-million-dollar wrongful death lawsuit that would have exposed his failing hands, Dad had Mom use her hospital admin power to quickly and quietly adopt the woman's 2-year-old orphan. Maya, the sickness of it all made my head spin. My mother's grief on the college lawn was real. She truly loved Maya now, but the adoption started as a cold, calculated legal cover-up. "Dad's hands are failing worse now," Nolan warned. "He is losing his surgical precision due to age and stress. If Maya dies, he loses his perfect savior image. He needs Layla's kidney to maintain his fake legacy. We are turning these ledgers over to the medical board on Monday," I told him fiercely. "You don't have until Monday," Nolan shook his head. "Dad is holding a massive Save Maya charity press conference in the hospital's main glass atrium tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. He invited 3 local news stations. He plans to go on live television and announce that a selfish, estranged family member is refusing to save a dying child. He is going to publicly shame Layla into submitting to the surgery before the court even opens." "The medical board isn't enough," Nolan whispered, stepping back into the shadows. "Half of them are in his pocket. He will bury the evidence." I ran back to Aunt Martha's car and called Evelyn Vaughn immediately. "Evelyn, the board isn't enough. My father is raiding my clinics and sending spies. We need federal weight." "I know someone," Evelyn replied sharply over the speakerphone. "Detective Vance, FBI Financial Crimes. He's been chasing your father's ghost accounts for 5 years but lacked the physical proof to get a warrant. Meet him in an hour." We met Detective Vance in a dimly lit, 24-hour diner off the interstate. He was a cynical, sharp-eyed man in a wrinkled suit who looked at us like we were just another dead-end lead. "Dr. Mitchell is a fortress," Vance said bluntly, stirring his black coffee. "You bring me a blue folder, but I need a public slip-up to freeze those accounts legally before his lawyers bury me in paperwork." "He's holding a live press conference tomorrow at 10 a.m., I told him, sliding Layla's encrypted flash drive across the diner table. "We are going to corner him on live television. Be there, detective. When he lies to the press, we will hand you the keys to the fortress." Vance looked at the drive, his eyes finally widening with a dangerous spark. "I'll have my federal agents waiting in the ambulance bay. Don't miss." Sunday morning, 7 a.m., the kitchen phone at Aunt Martha's cottage rang with a harsh, loud shrill. My father was calling from his hospital office, his voice echoing off the clinic walls. He didn't bother with a polite greeting. "Gwen, the press conference is in 3 hours," my father demanded, his voice devoid of any fatherly warmth. "I am not letting you touch my daughter," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I have the clinic investors ready. If Layla doesn't surrender to the nephrology ward today, I will have your entire life's work dismantled and Layla blacklisted from every hospital in New England." "You want to destroy my daughter for her organs?" I hissed, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. It's a standard medical procedure, Gwen. She is a nurse, she understands triage, he argued coldly. He was completely detached from reality, viewing humans only as pieces of a medical puzzle. I hung up the phone without another word. There was no reasoning with a monster who wore a white coat. I looked at the two women standing in the kitchen with me. We drove to Providence General Hospital in Aunt Martha's clunky station wagon instead of a fancy taxi. We didn't talk much on the drive. We were preparing for a war. Evelyn Vaughn and Detective Vance were waiting for us in the cold ambulance bay, flanked by 3 grim-faced members of the state medical board and 2 federal agents in windbreakers. Evelyn gave me a sharp nod. "The news vans are all here," Evelyn whispered, pointing to 3 large broadcasting trucks with satellite dishes. "Your father is pulling out all the stops to make himself look like a tragic hero." I looked at Layla. She looked terrifyingly calm in her crisp green nursing scrubs and white sneakers. "She is walking right into the belly of the beast," my inner monologue screamed. "But she is not prey." We walked through the sliding emergency doors, the smell of antiseptic and rubbing alcohol hitting us instantly. The hospital's main glass atrium was completely transformed into a public relations circus. Instead of crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes, there were glaring TV lights and hospital administrators holding clipboards. Around 100 people were gathered, including nurses, local journalists, and wealthy hospital donors. They were all whispering, waiting for the great Dr. Mitchell to speak. Layla and I stood near the back, hidden behind a large row of potted artificial ferns. Aunt Martha tightened her grip on her silver cane, the dark blue folder tucked safely under her left arm. Evelyn, Detective Vance, and the medical board members stood quietly to the side, watching. At exactly 10 a.m., a hush fell over the atrium as my parents walked onto the raised medical platform. My father was wearing a perfectly pressed white lab coat, heavily playing the part of the heroic, desperate surgeon. He looked commanding and powerful. My mother looked terribly frail. She was actually seated in a wheelchair, hooked up to a fake 4-drip to look extra sympathetic for the news cameras. It was a disgusting, manipulative display of wealth and power. My father adjusted the microphone, looking directly into the red blinking light of the Channel 5 news camera. "Thank you all for coming. As the chief of surgery, I have spent 40 years saving lives in this very building." His voice echoed powerfully. The atrium was completely silent. He held up a giant, heartbreaking poster board showing Maya lying in a hospital bed attached to a dialysis machine. "But today I am failing to save my own 14-year-old daughter. Maya is dying of severe kidney failure and her time is up." The journalists furiously scribbled on their notepads, completely captivated by his tragic performance. "We have a perfect DNA match in our extended family. A young woman who has selfishly turned her back on her dying sister," he announced, fake tears glistening in his eyes. "I am begging her, publicly, to do the right thing and save my little girl's life." My mother covered her face with her pale hands, sobbing weakly into a tissue. It was the ultimate guilt trip, broadcast live to thousands of people. The crowd murmured in outrage. A wealthy donor standing near us muttered, "What kind of monster lets a child die?" I looked at Layla. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked furious. She gave me a firm nod. It was time to operate. I stepped out from behind the potted ferns, my shoes clicking sharply against the polished hospital floor. The noise echoed like a gunshot. "You aren't begging a family member, Dr. Mitchell," I called out, my voice slicing through the heavy, sterile air. "You are trying to bully a stranger into forced organ harvesting." The entire atrium gasped. The news cameras instantly pivoted away from my father, their heavy lenses swinging toward Layla and me with loud, mechanical clicks. My father's fake, sorrowful expression shattered. He gripped the podium so hard his knuckles turned purple, his crisp white coat no longer looking like a hero's shield, but a desperate disguise. Layla didn't wait for me. She marched straight up the steps of the medical platform, her green nursing scrubs standing out against the sterile white background. She didn't look like a scared victim. She looked like an angry professional. "My name is Layla Wright. I am a registered nurse, and I am the DNA match he is talking about," Layla announced, staring directly into the Channel 5 camera. "Dr. Mitchell illegally accessed my protected medical files. That is a massive HIPAA violation and a federal crime." My father rushed forward, reaching for the microphone. "Turn the cameras off. This is a private family matter," he shouted, his deep voice cracking. "There is nothing private about your crimes, Robert," Aunt Martha barked, slamming her silver cane against the metal stairs. She began handing physical copies of the Blue Folder's documents directly to the greedy hands of the front row journalists. While all eyes were on Layla and Martha, I slipped behind the podium and jammed Layla's flash drive into the hospital's presentation laptop. I pressed enter. Instantly, the giant 80-inch screen behind my father changed. The heartbreaking picture of Maya vanished. Instead, it was replaced by Chloe's digital logs, bright red numbers showing millions of dollars transferred from the hospital charity fund into an offshore shell company. The wealthy hospital donors in the crowd began to shout, "Is that our charity money?" A man in a sharp suit yelled, his face turning red with fury. I clicked the next slide. The screen flashed to the forged surgical report from 20 years ago. The botched surgery that paralyzed Mason's uncle. 20 years ago, you ruined a man's life because your hands were shaking from a hangover, I said into the microphone, the smell of burning projector bulbs mixing with the sour scent of my father's nervous sweat. You stole charity money to pay off the victims. And when my boyfriend, the nephew of the man you paralyzed, found the proof, you threw your own pregnant teenager into the street to discredit him. I felt a dark, uncomfortable twist in my stomach, my inner monologue noted. I was destroying a man's entire life on live television. But I had to cut out the poison to save my daughter. Suddenly, Evelyn Vaughn stepped out of the shadows, leading the state medical board and Detective Vance. The head of the medical board, a tall, serious woman, walked right up to my father. "Dr. Mitchell, as of this exact moment, your medical license is indefinitely suspended pending a federal investigation," she declared loudly. Detective Vance stepped forward, flashing his gold badge directly into the TV cameras. "And Dr. Mitchell, the FBI has officially frozen all your offshore accounts as of 5 minutes ago. You are under arrest for embezzlement, extortion, and medical fraud." My father stumbled backward, his God complex evaporated in real time, leaving behind a terrified, shaking old man. He looked utterly pathetic. But then something unexpected happened. My mother jumped out of her wheelchair. The fake 4 drip ripped out of her arm, hitting the floor, proving her frailty was a complete lie. She didn't care about the cameras or the scandal. She threw herself onto the hard stage floor right at my feet, grabbing my knees. "Gwen, please, punish him, put him in jail, I don't care. But Maya is dying, she didn't do anything wrong." Donna sobbed, her tears ruining her expensive makeup. It was a messy, humiliating display. She was completely stripped of her administrator pride. I looked down at her. She was a deeply flawed, selfish woman. But in that raw moment, her maternal terror for Maya was 100% real. She loved that adopted girl with all the fierce protection she had denied me. I looked at Layla. My daughter's eyes softened with genuine medical compassion. "We weren't monsters like them. We aren't going to let Maya die," Layla said clearly into the microphone, her voice echoing with pure grace. "I will take the compatibility tests, but I will do it at a different hospital, with different doctors, on my own terms. Not because you blackmailed me, but because I am a nurse, and I save lives." The crowd erupted into stunned applause. My father collapsed into the empty wheelchair my mother had abandoned, burying his face in his trembling hands. He had lost everything. The hospital, his reputation, his license. I reached down and gently pulled my mother's hands off my knees. "We are done here," I whispered. I didn't threaten him with a lawsuit or wave the inheritance papers in his face. Instead, I handed the original dark blue folder directly to Detective Vance. "You have everything you need," I said quietly. Within 20 minutes, Vance's federal agents arrived at the atrium. They didn't just ask my father to leave. They placed Dr. Robert Mitchell in cold steel handcuffs. The loud click of the metal echoed over the whispers of the shocked donors. Did I just destroy my own blood? My inner monologue whispered, a heavy knot of guilt forming in my stomach. No. I stopped a predator. He looked small, fragile, and utterly defeated as they marched him out. That same afternoon, Layla was admitted to Boston Memorial Hospital, far away from my father's corrupt territory. We met Maya for the first time in a sterile, beeping ICU room. She wasn't the arrogant, shiny replacement child I had resented in my head. She was just a terrified 14-year-old girl whose skin was completely yellow from liver and kidney failure. "I sent the messages," Maya whispered weakly, looking at Layla with tears in her eyes. "I tried to tell you to run." When I looked at Maya's fragile, bruised arms, my heart broke, and I felt deeply ashamed for ever being angry at her. She was just another one of my father's victims. "Thank you," Maya whispered to Layla, her voice as thin as paper. Layla gently held the girl's hand. "We nurses stick together. Layla smiled. Instead of a viral YouTube video of an anniversary party, the fallout hit the national evening news. Renowned chief of surgery arrested for decades of medical fraud. The headlines blared across every TV screen. By Tuesday, Providence General Hospital's entire board of directors was forced to resign. My father's medical empire crumbled to dust in less than 48 hours. On Wednesday, Nolan and Chloe didn't just come to my house for a casual family visit. They met me at the federal courthouse in downtown Boston. They both officially testified against our father under oath, handing over all the encrypted digital files. "It's over," Nolan said, wiping his tired eyes as we stood on the courthouse steps. "I resigned from my surgical residency today. I can't wear the Mitchell name on a white coat anymore." Chloe hugged me tight, smelling like rain and coffee. "We finally did the right thing, Gwen. It wasn't a perfect happy ending, but it was the start of real healing." 2 weeks later, the transplant surgery was a complete success. Layla was recovering beautifully in her hospital bed, eating cherry popsicles. Maya's body accepted the new kidney perfectly, bringing the color back to her cheeks. The real shock came during Maya's physical rehabilitation. I walked into Maya's recovery room carrying natural ginger teas and essential oils from my holistic wellness clinic to help with her post-surgery nausea. My mother Donna was sitting by the bed, looking exhausted in cheap sweatpants. No makeup, no designer silk. When she saw me treating Maya's pain with gentle acupressure, Donna didn't yell or judge my alternative medicine. She just wept silently, burying her face in her hands. "I am so sorry, Gwen, for everything," she mouthed. She was broken, humbled, and finally acting like a real mother, just not to me. A few days later, the reporter from New England Health magazine called my office. "Gwen, the medical community is reeling," the journalist said eagerly. "We want to do a cover story, the whistleblower CEO who cured a corrupt hospital. Are you in?" I looked out my office window at the Boston harbor, watching the dark storm clouds finally clear away. My business email wasn't flooded with teenagers complaining about their parents. It was filled with young medical students and nurses. They were thanking Layla for standing up for medical ethics. We didn't just survive, I thought, taking a deep breath of the fresh ocean air. We changed the system. 3 weeks after the press conference, I didn't get a tearful phone call from my mother. Instead, I walked into the cold gray visitors' room of the Federal Detention Center. The room smelled intensely of cheap bleach and old metal. My father, Dr. Robert Mitchell, sat behind a thick sheet of reinforced glass. He was wearing a baggy orange prison jumpsuit, his once perfect hands shaking violently from withdrawal, not from drugs, but from the loss of his power. I sat down and picked up the heavy plastic telephone. He slowly picked up his end. He looked hollow, like a ghost of the tyrant who had terrified me for 20 years. I thought I would feel triumphant, my inner monologue whispered. But looking at him, I just feel a sad, heavy pity. He destroyed his family for a title that doesn't exist in a prison cell. I slid the empty dark blue folder through the small metal slot at the bottom of the glass. "Aunt Martha wanted you to have this," I said quietly, as a reminder that the truth always finds the light. He stared at the empty folder, a tear finally escaping his cold eyes. I didn't wait for him to speak. I hung up the phone and walked out into the fresh air. 2 days later, my mother didn't hide in her mansion. She walked through the front doors of Haven Holistic Wellness. The clinic smelled like warm lavender and fresh ginger. Donna was holding Maya's hand tightly, guiding the recovering teenager into my waiting room. My mother looked nervous, her eyes scanning the soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She walked up to my desk and quietly asked for holistic nutrition advice to help Maya's kidney heal. It was the ultimate surrender. The proud hospital administrator was asking the disgraceful holistic healer for help. "I am not ready to forgive you for what you did to me," I told my mother honestly, keeping my boundaries firm. "But Maya is my patient now, and I will give her the best care possible." Donna nodded, tears filling her eyes. She squeezed Maya's hand with fierce, genuine maternal love. She was finally learning how to be a real mother. It was too late for me, but it was exactly what Maya needed. The deepest heartbreak came the very next morning. We found Great Aunt Martha peacefully asleep in her favorite rocking chair at the cottage, but she wasn't breathing. Her strong, brave heart had finally given out. In her cold hands, she was tightly holding the heavy silver locket that belonged to my grandmother. I fell to my knees and sobbed. Martha had stayed alive just long enough to finish the mission she promised my grandmother. She had protected me, and she had taken down the monster. In her will, Martha left the little cluttered cottage entirely to Layla. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a home built on true love. By spring 2026, the federal government had completely seized my father's hidden offshore bank accounts. Instead of throwing a New Year's dinner party, our family stood outside a freshly painted brick building in downtown Boston. The ocean breeze felt clean and full of promise. The state had used the recovered charity millions to open a free community health clinic for poor families. I watched with tears in my eyes as Nolan, wearing a simple blue sweater instead of a fancy surgeon's coat, nailed the new sign above the door. He was working there full-time doing pro bono free basic medical care, finally using his medical degree to help people instead of chasing status. Chloe stood next to him cheering loudly. The sign read, "The Mason Wright Community Healing Center." Layla stood on the front steps, adjusting her green nurse's uniform. She had been hired as the head nurse of the new facility. She didn't give a toast over a dining table. She gave a speech to the cheering community. "My father was a janitor who believed in doing the right thing, even when it was dangerous," Layla told the crowd, her voice ringing out bright and clear. "This clinic is for anyone who has ever felt invisible in a sterile hospital system. Here you will be seen. Here you will be healed." Later that evening, I stood alone in the empty clinic, touching the cool painted walls. My trauma hadn't magically vanished. I still had nightmares about the rain sometimes. But healing isn't a quick surgery. It is a slow, daily physical therapy. If you are out there listening to this and your toxic family makes you feel like you are just a broken part they can use or throw away, please hear me. You are not medical waste. You are not their property. Sometimes you have to cut out the infection of your own family to save your life. My father will spend the rest of his life in a federal cell. My mother is trying to be better, one day at a time. And me? I am exactly where my grandmother told me to be. I am building a life of healing. Thank you for listening to my story. If this gave you the courage to stand up to your own abusers, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Stay strong, and keep healing.